Festival John McGrath, from our Head of Orchestras and Ensembles Andrew Bailey about the college's Professional Experiences scheme, music and conversation from composer and pianist Gwilym Simcock, as well as a former and current student on some of their RNCM collaboration experiences. Alongside music from Gwilym, we have a typically eclectic set of pieces from the RNCM archive and friends, including New Order, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, Sylvette, and Margaret Lowe. The RNCM radio team and I have been immensely enjoying your radio jingles, and to that end we've decided to extend our call for a few more days until Thursday the 4th of June at 5 p.m. We'll be playing out as many of the best submissions that we can next Tuesday. First this afternoon, what better way to kick off a programme exploring collaboration than a new recording made under lockdown by the current RNCM flute students. Soon after we closed our doors, it was clear that we would be able to keep teaching, assessing and sharing music, but the biggest challenge would be making new ensemble music together. The joy of ensemble music is usually so dependent on the presence of the musicians, not just of course for the sound, but for the physical movement, cueing, eye contact, and overall shared experience. Our head of wind, brass and percussion, Nicholas Thompson, initiated an exciting competition for his department to try and address this, for each instrumental group to assemble a multi-tracked recording of a piece or new or existing arrangement. This way of working rigorously engages our performance practice, as the challenges of coordination and tuning are increased when you're not all together, as does the engagement with technology, the way we communicate about music, and our focused critical listening when we are working both alone and as part of a group. The winning entry from the trombonists was a truly excellent arrangement of some of the music from Star Wars. However, today we're going to share the flutist's contribution, which was narrowly in second place. Dawn Carol by Margaret Lowe was originally written for the James Madison University Flute Choir in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and is designed to be played by as many flutists as possible scattered around the venue. Each person has the same page of music and comes in sequentially after 6 beats, emphasizing rhythmic freedom to allow for a vibrant textural canon. It's a clever choice for the competition, as rhythmic concerns are minimized. However, with so much unison, the tuning situation is unforgiving, and it requires extremely careful mixing and editing to be convincing. This version is edited by Cara Horton, who is also playing alongside 14 other members of the RNCM flute department. I was recently able to speak with the artistic director of the Manchester International Festival, John McGrath. The festival has been going since 2007, and the RNCM has been connected to it on a number of occasions right from the beginning. In the first festival, through the entanglement of iconic visual artists with a symphony orchestra in Il Tempo del Postino, and more recently in projects with Maxime Peake and Sarah Frankham, and New Order. The festival has established itself as an essential part of both the Manchester and international cultural calendars, and we discussed what makes the festival so unusual.
The founding idea behind Manchester International Festival in particular was that it would tap into the spirit of the city, which has always been a spirit of inventiveness, the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, by being the first festival in the world to entirely focus on ambitious new commissions. So most festivals will have a combination of existing work that's on tour and some work that is being made new for that festival. But Manchester was going to be the first large-scale festival in the world to entirely focus on new work. So during the festival, 95% of the things that you see will be things that prior to Manchester International Festival opening that year just didn't exist. They were in rehearsal, they were in development. And so it creates a particular excitement around the festival when it happens. The big developments that we've been doing over the last few years have been thinking about our presence in the city year round, how we connect to the various communities of Manchester and keep those connections going in the space between what is, after all, a festival that only takes place for 18 days every 2 years. So really looking at what our longer term and wider impact is. And a big manifestation of that, of course, is the building that we're now building with the City Council, the factory, which will be a home for the kind of work that the festival does year round.
A festival of entirely new work, especially from such high-profile artists, is an inherently risky business. I wanted to know to what extent John's role is in creating artistic collisions of different kinds of practice and cultures, or if this is entirely artist-driven, and however disparate it may look from the outside, it's just the right fit at the right time.
That's a really good question. I mean, it's a bit of a combination of both. I mean, we always put the artist's vision at the heart of things. And so the process of curating the festival is a series of invitations to artists to come and make work. And what that work will be is often unpredictable. So we will often commit to a journey with an artist, not knowing what the outcome is going to be. And yet at the same time, it is also my job to curate a festival and to think about what is the overall shape of this and what's the overall range of work, who is it going to reach, what does it say about the world that we're in. I mean, I've been really keen to make sure that we think about international in the truly global sense, not just in the sense of, say, Western Europe and North America, and that we make sure that there are artists from all the continents making work for the festival, and out of that also finding a resonance in the many different communities of Manchester and the UK presently. So I think that the process of curation and the process of invitation are in a delicate and interesting balance with each other.
New Order and the RNCM might seem like an unlikely combination. I was curious to know how this came about.
Well, it very specifically came from an idea from Bernard of the band. We've been talking with New Order about a possible project for MIF, and the starting point of the conversation was a collaboration with a visual artist and looking at who those visual artists or artists might be. But then we had a big meeting with Bernard prior actually to the artist being chosen, where he came in with a drawing for us that was a grid and suggested that in that grid he would like to place a wall of synthesizer players and to kind of deconstruct the elements of the New Order's back catalogue of songs and reconstruct them with a live synthesizer orchestra. That for him would be an interesting way then into thinking with a visual artist about what the music was and how it might be presented. So the idea of a synthesizer orchestra came very early in the process, And Bernard also mentioned the work that they've been doing with classical orchestras. And Joe Dudell had been part of that in terms of doing arrangements. And his curiosity was around whether, in a way, you could take the way that their music had been deconstructed and reconstructed for classical orchestra and think about that in relation to the synthesizer, which, of course, has been at the heart of the language of that band from day one. Although RNCM might not seem an obvious match with New Order, actually, this idea of a journey from a pop band into orchestral, and through orchestral into this orchestra of synthesizers actually was very central to the project. And in some ways, when you see that journey, you see that there's a real logic that we ended up working with RNCM.
In the last two festivals, the RNCM contributed both a synthesizer orchestra for the New Order show and musicians for the Nico project. These were both creative projects for everyone involved. I asked John to talk about what the college's musicians specifically contributed to these events.
So in both those cases that we talk about, the musical vision for the work was very unique and needed very high-skilled playing. So obviously in New Order, we talked about the way in which it was thinking about synthesizer as orchestra and orchestra as synthesizer. In the Nico project, with a new score by Anna Klein, that score was in a deconstruction of Nico's Marble Index album and a recreation of that in the very specific surreal performance environment that had been created by the creative team. So in both cases, it needed, in a way, the kind of enthusiasm and flexibility and capacity to get stuck in that these young players have. But it also needed the kind of skill level that the RNCM brings to its students. So we're always very careful at MIS that we wouldn't want to replace a professional role with a student role, say. But if there's a project where it really feels that it would be perfect for the kind of enthusiastic, flexible, highly skilled students that you have at RNCM, doing something that steps outside what might ordinarily happen within the college, but also what might ordinarily happen within the performance environment. Those are the kind of projects that feel like a perfect match for the school. And I would definitely say that in both cases, the musicians involved have been really thrilled, actually, by the capacity of your young musicians.
There has been a trend over the last 20 years or so for combining the performance practice associated with classical music and iconic historical pop and electronica as an exercise in nostalgia. Both these projects look back at earlier music, but are not nostalgia projects. They emphasize innovation and are progressive in terms of music, gender, and situation. Do you see your direction in tension with this nostalgia, or do you ignore it or address it elsewhere?
I think it's a really important comment, and it was absolutely central to both of those projects, that this was about creating a new work and referencing this historical body of work, but that it was about rethinking that work in the present and making a new work out of these various elements. And in each case, I think you're absolutely right. That was what was achieved. I think that how that relates to other projects that might have a more nostalgic tone to them, in a way, is for others to judge rather than us. But I would say that our conversation with artists is always about what work would you like to make now that you wouldn't be able to make without the support of MIS. And so that is always, very deeply about a process of invention and a process of creating the new.
Let's hear New Order and Liam Gillick with the RNCM Synthesizer Orchestra, orchestrated and conducted by Joe Dudell, playing the iconic 1985 track Subculture, live at Manchester International Festival in 2017.
shut without someone else. In the end you will submit. It's got to hurt a little bit. One of these days, one of these days, I like talking in my sleep. When people work so hard, they need what they can keep. Sure, said Liz and Scott, a room without a view. All veils the truth so soon. And when the sun goes down, you've lost what you had. What do I get out of this? I always try, I always miss. One of these days you'll go back to your home. You won't even notice that you are alone. One of these days when you sit by yourself, you realize you can't share without someone else. In the end you will submit. It's got to hurt a little bit.
My name is Charlie Sinclair. I'm the guitarist and singer in the band Sylvette. We met at the Royal Northern College of Music about 5 years ago, and we've been together ever since. Philippos Rousiamanis is the violin and keyboard player. Pete Lever is the drummer, Ashley Garrett is the bass player, and Jack March is the other guitarist. Working with New Order was an absolutely incredible experience in so many ways. To be able to have an insight and an understanding of the inner workings of one of the most influential bands ever was a complete privilege, and it was really interesting seeing how, as musicians, they have such a different background to us, but they have such a profound understanding of the music that they write in a way that I think we could all learn a lot from. It was also really interesting to see such an ambitious idea be pulled off, and it was very inspiring to see that when we came into the project, it was just the very starting point of this crazy, ambitious idea. And we watched it come together from us sitting in a room with just these scores and these sounds, and nothing was working, to suddenly, a few months later, we were playing in front of thousands of people with a full lighting design and set design, and there were 20 musicians playing and collaborating together in the night.
One extraordinary outcome from the RNCM's collaboration with the Manchester International Festival is the creative relationship that has developed between Sylvette and New Order's Phil Cunningham.
Phil was probably the most chatty member of New Order. He was really, really lovely to all of us from the start, and he never made us feel like there was any hierarchy between the band and us, the keyboard players. But we got quite close because he's the New Order guitarist, and even though I was playing keyboard, my main instrument is guitar. So I used to chat to him a lot about it, and I eventually found out that he had a band in the 90s called Marion, which are quite similar to the kind of music that Sylvette makes, or it comes from a similar place. I found out that Marion toured with some of the artists that have inspired us, like Radiohead and Morrissey, and that was really cool. And I then gave him some of our music, and he checked it out and really enjoyed it. And then as the tour went on, we kind of got closer, and I eventually asked him if he had any advice for producers that could make our second record, because we wanted to move on from how we did the first album. And he said he'd be up for doing it, which was amazing, with his friend Jake Evans. And that collaboration turned into a wonderful thing that we all really valued. And the last year working with them has been really special. And Phil kind of took so many years of experience working with some of the best producers in the world in the top studios, and it was great to have that in a really chilled environment in Macclesfield. One of the best things actually was his gear setup, and he'd have all these crazy pedals or synths or guitars that we could take the time to explore and try out. So yeah, it was a really great experience. Panel of Glass is one of the tracks of the new album, and it's one of the first songs that we all collaborated on, which was really great. Philip had a big input for the first time, which was really brilliant. And it was kind of inspired by a conversation I had with my dad when I was about 10. And it was just after my grandmother had passed away, and he was talking about mortality and kind of trying to console me when we were in a car and it was raining. And he said that life is like a drop on a panel of glass, and where it would take these turns, he would say that's when unexpected things happen, but it forms these intricate patterns that's life. And I just remembered that and thought it was quite a profound sentiment. But then I started thinking about it in a slightly different way, and relating it to the patterns that are found in nature and in the universe. And the Mandelbrot set that's in the kind of formula for chaos, or the God formula, that out of complete chaos there's always this order, there's always beautiful patterns, and there's always symmetry. So I kind of wanted to take the song from a really intimate moment between me and my dad in the car, and then as the song progresses and we go down this strange wormhole, I want that pattern to revolve and kind of expand in a kaleidoscopic way. And we're suddenly shot through time and space and chaos, and it all gets very strange and fun.
The ending of this song has echoes of Wilco, and in a good way. The experimentation and occasional savagery that Nels Cline brought to them is, in Sylvette, already firmly in place. Here's reflective, exploratory pop with a serrated edge. This is Sylvette and Panel of Glass.
Some words stay with me. They stick to my mind, then they thicken with time. Father, why did she have to fall? He said life a drop on this panel of glass. It's too beautiful to last. See how the paths can suddenly change. Each drop returns to the sea. Now she lives in you and me. I saw the drops connected to a pattern I had seen before. Now I spend the days with you. It reminds me of the words he gave to me. Somewhere on the glass that day are drops by the wind, were drawn out from their paths into a single stream of light.
Hi, I'm Andrew Bailey, and I'm the Head of Orchestras and Ensembles at the RNCM. The RNCM Professional Experience Schemes are a set of over 12 partnerships with professional orchestras and ensembles across the UK and Europe. They offer our students an important opportunity to play in that professional orchestra or ensemble, sitting side by side with its players in both rehearsals and concerts. The basic model of the majority of the professional experience schemes is that they are open to the widest number of students at the initial stage. So any undergraduate Year 3, Year 4 or postgraduate student can apply for an audition taken by a professional orchestra panel, after which they can receive a combination of written and verbal feedback. The second stage of a scheme may then involve a series of workshops with a group of students selected from the auditions and are based around core repertoire that may feature in the forthcoming seasons of that orchestra or performing group. The final stage of each scheme is always the professional placement, where a small number of students who are deemed suitably qualified by the orchestra are given opportunities to sit in and play in their rehearsals and public concerts. The RNCM's professional experience schemes provide our students with a range of opportunities to experience the best ensemble training direct from the professional orchestral musicians in a real-world environment. They are among the best orchestra training opportunities on offer at any conservatoire in the world, and are seen by both the students and our professional partners as an incredibly important aspect of the education on offer at the RNCM. The relationships with our professional orchestra partners have become increasingly important in the design of the RNCM Orchestras and Ensembles programme, with the premise of students working side by side with professional players at their core. Through some great collaborative work between fellow RNCM colleagues and our professional experience scheme partners, a large number of high-quality projects have been devised, into which our students aspire to be involved. The current player lists of many UK professional orchestras stand as testament to the strength of the teaching and training on offer at the RNCM, with large numbers of our alumni being a prominent feature. Many of the players working currently in these orchestras often credit the RNCM professional experience schemes as their own invaluable first step into the profession. In the local and regional professional orchestras and ensembles in the north of England, the proportion of RNCM alumni in permanent or contracted seats ranges from 30% in the case of the Orchestra of Opera North and the Royal Northern Sinfonia, through to an incredible 85% in the case of Manchester Camerata. For me, over the past couple of years, it's been a great personal and professional joy to learn of the appointments of a number of recent RNCM graduates into professional orchestras across the UK. These include Alex Mitchell, Principal Viola at Manchester Camerata, Lily Whitehurst, Tutti Second Violin at BBC Philharmonic, Eva Thorarensdottir, Associate Leader of the RLPO, Becky Else in the First Violins of the RLPO, Matthew Head, Second Horn at the Halle, Josh Sertina, Principal Bass Trombone at the RPO, and Amy Yule, recently appointed Principal Flute at the Halle. I have positive memories of these particular RNCM alumni during their time at college, including their successful progression through various professional experience schemes. It is very rewarding to feel that these schemes will have had in some way a positive influence towards these individuals' progression into a professional orchestral career. As the years progress at the RNCM, I look forward to celebrating more of our alumni who will inevitably begin their professional orchestral careers in the near future.
Hello, I'm Cara and I am a fourth year at the RNCM. I play the flute and next year I am going to be the new SU president. This year I had the opportunity to play with the Netherlands Wind Ensemble as part of the RNCM's professional experience scheme. Myself and two other students were successful in the workshop audition, and together we travelled over to Amsterdam between Christmas and New Year for a few days of rehearsals. This ended with 2 concerts in the Concertgebouw on New Year's Day, and it was televised. We had 4 whole days of rehearsals leading up to the concert, and everyone in the ensemble was so welcoming to us. The musicians were all really talented, and they were so encouraging of our playing. They play loads from memory, and this was asked of us after just one rehearsal. I was really surprised to find out that I was able to do it without too much difficulty, because it's not something that I've ever really been comfortable with. The NBE are massively centred around the performance aspect, so I found that by moving around and focusing on the enjoyment, my playing managed to just keep up with me. This wasn't really something I'd done much before the PER scheme, and it's helped me to gain a lot of confidence in my ability. The concert was a massive party. We had dancers, a juggler, a huge slide in the middle of the stage, and someone dressed up as Beethoven. The music was really varied, but the overall theme was Beethoven, with it being his 250th birthday this year. At the end of each performance, hundreds of balloons were released from the ceiling of the hall, and that moment was genuinely one of the best feelings I've ever had, and it was so stunning to see that the crowd was so happy, and I felt like this was all I wanted to do for the rest of my career. It was beautiful to look at, and the whole room just had the most amazing atmosphere. Playing with the NBE did so much for me. Firstly, when I went over, I'd just completed my postgrad auditions, and I was really struggling to decide on what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go. I didn't realise it, but by the end of the week, my mind had cleared a lot, and I'd met not only amazing musicians, but extremely creative artists. And I knew that this aspect was something I really wanted to take into my future, and it helped me decide where my next step was going to be. There was a really big emphasis of always being aware when on stage and supporting the soloists, and the ensemble would literally cheer and whoop whenever they enjoyed something that other players were doing. This was such a positive experience, and I felt that my playing came on leaps and bounds just because I was surrounded by other professionals who were enjoying every moment and were allowing me to enjoy every moment by not putting any pressure on me. They didn't just bring happiness to the full audience, but they brought it to each other, even in the whole day rehearsals that were really tiring. And there was such an emphasis on teamwork. They didn't have a conductor, they all led each other, and they all just knew each other so well. My most memorable moment about the whole experience was actually the evening after our final concert. It wasn't necessarily a musical experience, but I feel like it has impacted me quite a lot. It was a really exciting evening. After the concert, we all got taken in cars to one of the most beautiful mansion-type houses that I've ever seen, and it was home to one of the NBE's biggest supporters. We were all provided with food and drink, and we piled into the lounge to watch the performance back. This is a tradition that they do every year, and I can see why. With how tight the schedule is, there isn't really much opportunity to grasp how big the performance is, so we all sat and watched, and people congratulated each other on their playing, and I felt amazing when people called out to me after hearing a part I played. I think it's really easy to get in your own head and doubt your playing when we're being pushed so much at college, and to be sat in a room of professionals and to be told that I sounded good was really good for me, actually. And I remember looking around the room and just feeling so grateful because I'd met musicians from all over the world, and I knew I was so lucky to have this opportunity. It was a group of people that would probably never gather again, and I learnt so much from each and every one of them, and I knew that this experience would be a really tough one to top.
The Chamber Orchestra of Europe Mozart project in February 2019 took place over 4 days and involved 3 of their players: Lucy Gould, guest leader, Richard Lester, principal cello, and Matthew Wilkie, principal bassoon. During their time at the RNCM, these 3 players worked with the RNCM Chamber Orchestra towards a public lunchtime concert of Mozart's Prague Symphony, plus an RNCM student commission for Wind Octet. In addition to this, the COA players also delivered some chamber music coaching and gave 20 of our students the opportunity to audition for the COE Academy. Following this project, we received a great deal of positive student feedback, but I also did receive a comment from our erstwhile vice principal and eminent Mozart scholar, Professor Martin Harlow, who said it was the best RNCM orchestra performance of a Mozart symphony he had heard during his 18 years at college. So altogether, very high praise indeed.
That was the finale of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart's Prague Symphony No. 38, performed by the RNCM Concert Orchestra with principals from the Chamber Orchestra of Europe, directed by Lucy Gould. You've also been listening to Cara Horton, who's responsible for the Dawn Carol earlier in the show, and Andrew Bailey. Last week I had the chance to catch up with Gwilym Simcock. The last time he was at the RNCM, it was for the New Music Manchester Festival last October, with a new version of his piece Move. As someone who is closely associated with jazz, this was, nevertheless, the perfect festival to showcase his music making. Gwilym is a composer and pianist who connects an innovative jazz world with a rigorous classical training and appreciation. I asked him about that feeling of musically not quite fitting into one place, even back in his Cheetham School of Music days.
Whilst I really enjoyed it there, it did make me feel like I wasn't quite sure that becoming, say, a concert pianist and learning to play your piece of Rachmaninoff or Chopin or whatever it is, and sort of playing, training something up and trying to give a perfect performance of something that's been played brilliantly a million times before, didn't necessarily feel for me exactly what I wanted to do with music. I like the idea of having more creative input into music and doing something which was a bit more my own direction. But being completely honest, definitely the performance nerve side of it was a big thing for me. I always sort of found that very, very difficult, and going, especially when you're a pianist, and you're going out there on your own, and as I say, playing these pieces that everybody knows note for note, and they know if you've made a mistake, and certainly when you're going to a place like Cheetham's, where it has to be a kind of competitive, very strict pace in the way that if you play a couple of wrong notes, then obviously you're told off because that's a bad performance. And that idea of music being kind of right and wrong, I found that hard, as I was getting into my teens.
And jazz and the spontaneity associated with it was the solution.
I was lucky really that there were some great teachers there, and they introduced me to jazz music and some jazz musicians whose music wasn't a sort of aesthetically a million miles away from classical music. People like Keith Jarrett and Egberto Gismonti and Pat Metheny, that I was introduced to some of their tracks, which had a very kind of the same expansive sound world that a lot of classical music does, and there was the same kind of melodic starting point and beautiful sort of harmonic progressions in the same way that I could see a connection to the classical world. I love the idea of improvisation, and actually, in a funny way, my dad all his life had always sat down at the piano and just sort of made things up and written music and improvised, not in the jazz way at all, but I was sort of always brought up as a child just thinking like you could just sit at the piano and play something without there having to be, a piece of music in front of you. So actually finding out that there was a whole genre of music dedicated to that was a bit of a revelation, really, in a way, and something that it seemed to make obvious sense.
Nevertheless, it was an early revelation that these two worlds belonged emphatically together.
So after leaving Cheetham's and when I was 18, and in 1999, a long time ago, I went down to the Royal Academy in London to do the jazz course there. So I was sort of specialising on jazz piano, and I had a great time there. So I was very lucky to have some great teachers. And I guess by the time I'd finished there, I sort of at that point, I suppose, realised that there was such a strong element of classical music and what feels like home for me, and what had been such a huge part of my musical training, that it seems sort of wrong not to have that in there somewhere. And so I guess ever since leaving college, I've sort of moved back towards working in projects and different things which do have a strong kind of classical leaning. What I do love is music which certainly has a classical structure, and a lot of the time has a kind of classical orchestration, but still has a space for improvisation in the middle. I mean, certainly this is nothing new. It's been something which has gone for, maybe 60 years or so. But for me, it's something that I feel that has all the elements of music that from the various places I've gleaned over the years and what feels like musical home to me. I'd rather just try to make music that kind of moves people and that takes people on some kind of journey, and whether that journey is a kind of 80% improvised one and 20% composed, or 30% improvised and 70% composed. I kind of want the two to flow into each other, if possible. I mean, of course, that all sounds a bit pretentious, but that's sort of what I'm trying to aim at when I'm writing pieces of music.
Gwilym has played with many jazz legends around the world, and collaboration is obviously central to his work. I asked if there were any highlights or particularly significant collaborations.
there are two situations, I guess. There are situations where you get to make music with people that you know very well, which is a very beautiful thing. And obviously someone like Nightwalk, for me, is in that category, which, someone who's a very close friend, and then we go out to make music together, which is a real treat. And then I guess the other situation is when you are thrown together for a project with someone like Bobby McFerrin or someone that maybe you've never met before, and then that can be really exciting because you get to know them through making music as well. I've been touring for the last couple of years with Pat Metheny, the jazz guitarist, and we made an album which came out relatively recently, actually. And he was one of the musicians that got me into jazz in the first place. So actually to then spend some considerable time sort of touring and making an album with one of my heroes, who changed my life as a musician, it has been obviously a very special experience and a very interesting one as well.
Move was originally written for the City of London Sinfonia conducted by Clark Rundell back in 2012. This version has 2/3 new music and was performed by RNCM students alongside members of the BBC Philharmonic. From the audience, I could tell that the improvisation was central not just to the soloists, but to the entire orchestra.
Absolutely. I'm really sort of strong believer in trying to get all instrumentalists to be involved with improvisation, because sometimes it's an art form within music that kind of gets largely forgotten, certainly in the classical world, apart from people like organists who are obviously improvising all the time. But in a way, it's quite nice to give the players a bit more ownership of the music, and I think it's important as well to remind musicians, I know it sounds like a bit of a weird thing to say, but to remind musicians that they can improvise, because we're not classical musicians are not always encouraged to do that. Yet when you get your instrument out of the case and you warm up and you're just playing or whatever it is you're doing, you're making stuff up. You're kind of improvising in that sense and just being at one with your instrument and making noise on it. But then I think a lot of classical musicians do get scared by the concept, ironically for me, of doing something wrong when they're improvising, because for me the great joy of improvisation is that it gets rid of those right and wrongs, and of course there are degrees of competence, I guess, and familiarity in the ways that you improvise. But actually I feel like there is no right and wrong. Really the most successful improvisations are actually the ones which have the greatest compositional coherence, and for me again, I always felt like improvisation was a natural thing to do because I'd always composed tunes and little pieces of music from when I was very young. And to me, improvisation is just like, at its best, is like spontaneous composition.
The original featured a trio of soloists, including Gwilym himself. This new version features a soloist quartet, with the significant addition of Rob Buckland, the RNCM Deputy Head of Chamber Music, and an internationally acclaimed saxophonist and composer.
Well, actually, Rob and I have been doing quite a large amount of music together over the last couple of years. So when the opportunity came up to do this concert, I actually added the part for Rob to play because I really wanted him to be involved, because that is an important part of what my music kind of making has been over the last few years, has been working with him. And he's just the perfect musician to work in this situation, because obviously has a wonderful understanding of the improvisation side and the jazz side on the saxophone. But he's just an incredible reader, and he just intuitively understands rhythmic feel, as well as how to play as part of an ensemble in a classical sense. And there are very few musicians in the world, really, I really mean it, who can really operate in both the worlds as completely as he does. And I guess as you get older, you end up sort of gravitating to the people you want to spend time with and making music with. And certainly Rob is absolutely, right at the top of that list of people who share the kind of the musical direction that I do. And I'd say the same for Yuri on bass and Martin on drums as well. And one of the beautiful things as a composer is when you're writing things for people that you know very well, because you can really tailor it to who they are as musicians and people.
So let's hear the final third of Gwilym Simcock's Move, performed by Gwilym with Rob Buckland, Yuri Golubev, Martin France, the BBC Philharmonic side by side with members of the RNCM, conducted by Clark Rundell, from a live performance at the RNCM last October. That's all from RNCM Radio this week. Tune in next Tuesday for another visit to the RNCM archive, a collection of brand new RNCM jingles, and more conversation with our students, colleagues and friends.